The rain had started falling just past 11, a thin drizzle at first, but by the time Vanessa stepped onto the nearly empty street, it had turned into a full downpour. She pulled her coat tighter around her body, her breath curling into the cold night air. The streetlights flickered weakly, their glow barely cutting through the swirling mist that coiled around the deserted bus stop. Vanessa had missed the last regular bus home, but according to the old schedule taped to the bus shelter's cracked glass, there was still one more, the midnight bus. She had never taken it before. She had never even seen it, but tonight, she had no other choice. As if summoned by her thoughts, a pair of headlights pierced through the fog. The sound of grinding gears and a low, heavy rumble approached. The bus was old, too old. Its metal frame was rusted, its windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. The doors hissed open, exhaling a breath of musty air. The driver, shadowed under his cap, didn't greet her. He merely nodded toward the seats, his face obscured by the dim overhead lights. Vanessa hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. Inside, the bus was dimly lit, the flickering fluorescent lights casting sickly yellow hues. The seats were mostly empty, except for a handful of passengers who sat unnaturally still, their heads tilted down as if in deep slumber. The air was damp and stale, carrying a faint, unidentifiable metallic scent. Vanessa moved toward the middle of the bus, sliding into a seat near the window. The vehicle lurched forward, and she barely had time to glance at the other riders before the city streets blurred past. Something about them felt off. The man closest to her was dressed in a suit that looked decades old, the fabric stiff and covered in faint stains. His hands, pale, almost gray, gripped a briefcase too tightly, his knuckles bone white. Across the aisle, a woman with long, stringy black hair sat completely still, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her skin was waxy, her lips barely parted, as if she were whispering something. Vanessa shuddered and looked away. Minutes passed, but Vanessa soon realized the bus wasn't following the usual route. The familiar city landmarks had disappeared, replaced by empty streets and unfamiliar buildings. The further they traveled, the more the scenery distorted. The roads seemed longer than they should have been. The streetlights grew dimmer, spaced farther apart, casting only fleeting glimpses of the outside. The buildings, what few remained, looked wrong, as though they had been abandoned for centuries. She leaned forward and called out to the driver. "Excuse me, I think you missed my stop." The driver didn't react. Her voice felt swallowed by the silence. One of the passengers, a man sitting 2 rows ahead, slowly turned his head toward her. The movement was too smooth, too mechanical. His eyes, sunken deep into his skull, held no light. Vanessa's breath caught in her throat. Something wasn't right. Vanessa gripped the edge of her seat, her pulse hammering against her ribs. She turned to the window, hoping to recognize anything. Instead, she saw something that made her stomach lurch. Her reflection was wrong. It mimicked her posture, but the eyes in the glass weren't hers. They were sunken, black voids, stretching wider than they should. The reflection's lips curled into a slow, unnatural smile. A whisper brushed against her ear. "Don't look away." Her heart slammed against her chest as she recoiled, whipping her gaze toward the other passengers. They were all looking at her now. Each face was slack, their eyes hollow. Their mouths opened in unison, but no sound emerged. Vanessa scrambled to her feet, gripping the seat in front of her to steady herself. She had to get off, but the doors were gone. There was no exit. The bus continued its relentless journey down the endless, darkened road. Outside, the world had completely changed. No more buildings, no more streets. Just a vast, swirling abyss of shadows stretching into infinity. She turned back toward the passengers, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. They were standing now. Every single one of them. Their heads tilted at unnatural angles, mouths stretched into grotesque grins. Their skin sagged, as if barely clinging to their bones. The driver finally spoke, his voice a low, inhuman rasp. "You shouldn't have gotten on." The lights flickered once, then died. Darkness swallowed the bus whole. The next morning, the city awoke to another routine day. The rain had stopped, the sky was clear, and the streets bustled with life. At the bus stop, a few regulars waited for their morning ride. None of them noticed the old, faded missing person poster taped to the glass shelter. A photograph of a young woman, smiling. A name, Vanessa Carter. A date, disappeared 1 year ago. No one remembered her. But at exactly midnight, an old bus rumbled through the empty street, its doors hissing open once more, waiting for its next passenger. A week passed. The city remained indifferent, moving at its usual pace, unaware that something was missing, someone. But deep within the forgotten corners of the transit system, in a dimly lit security room, an old man sat hunched over a series of grainy CCTV monitors. His tired eyes flickered between the feeds, his fingers absent-mindedly drumming against a faded incident logbook. A routine check, nothing unusual. Until the midnight bus appeared on screen. The feed was choppy, distorted with static, but he could make out the vehicle arriving at the stop. The doors opened and a passenger stepped in. A young woman. He squinted at the screen, his heart slowing in his chest. Something wasn't right. The bus never stopped again. It never appeared on the other cameras. It simply vanished. His hands trembled as he rewound the footage. This time, he froze the frame as the bus doors shut. The passenger was standing just inside, but her reflection in the glass wasn't hers. It was watching him, smiling. Midnight. A lone man sat at the empty bus stop, checking his watch impatiently. His phone had died hours ago, and the streets were deserted. He had never seen the bus schedule list a midnight ride, but the sign above him clearly read, "Last route, midnight service." A cold wind stirred the mist around his feet. The city felt unusually silent. Then, headlights emerged from the fog. The old bus pulled up, its doors hissing open. A breath of damp, musty air escaped. The driver, face obscured by his cap, gestured silently for him to board. The man hesitated. Something about the bus felt wrong, but the thought of walking home in the dark was worse. He sighed and stepped inside. The doors sealed shut behind him with a final, echoing clang. As the bus pulled away, the empty stop remained still. Only the faint flicker of a streetlight remained. And on the cracked glass of the bus shelter, something new had appeared. Another missing person poster. Edges still crisp, ink still fresh. The name on it was his. Inside the midnight bus, the new passenger took a cautious step forward. Dim, flickering lights cast eerie shadows over the rows of passengers, all seated, all facing forward. Something about them made his stomach knot. They sat too still. No one checked their phones, no one moved. Their hands rested in their laps, fingers curled unnaturally stiff. He picked a seat near the front and settled in. Then, a whisper. Faint, almost imperceptible, brushing against his ear. "Stay still." He jolted, twisting to see who had spoken, but the rows behind him remained unmoving. The whisper returned. "Don't look at them." His skin crawled. The voice was coming from beneath his seat. He couldn't take it anymore. He needed to get off. He pressed the stop button. Nothing happened. He called to the driver. No response. Panic clawed at his chest. He stood up, about to demand the doors open, when a hand gripped his wrist. Cold. Too cold. He turned sharply. The passenger beside him, a woman with stringy black hair, was gripping his wrist. Only now, he noticed her skin was wrong, like wax that had begun to melt. Her head slowly turned toward him. Her mouth opened, wider than it should, and in a voice that was no longer human, she whispered, "You already belong to the bus." The lights flickered once, and in the reflection of the grimy window, he saw himself, not as he was, but as something else, something that had been on this bus for a very long time. As realization hit him, the darkness came, and the bus rumbled on, waiting for the next soul. The next morning, the city continued. No one noticed the new missing person flyer at the bus stop. No one remembered his name, but somewhere, a midnight bus rolled through an endless, darkened highway. And in its seats, the ones who had come before waited, unmoving, watching. Because once you board the midnight bus, you never leave.